My daughter spent 3 days cooking for 23 people for my mom's event, but what happened? Broke me welcome. Back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. At the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone.
I never thought a simple weekend could turn into one of the hardest, most unforgettable experiences of my life. I'm Alec Rose, and I still remember the way that Friday morning began, like it was ordinary, harmless, nothing special. The kitchen smelled like fresh bread and cinnamon, and sunlight poured through the windows, warming the counters where I had already started laying out ingredients. My daughter, Lily, had been planning this for weeks. 3 days, she told me, 3 days of cooking for everyone, our whole family, more than 20 people. I watched her move around the kitchen with such focus, such determination, and I couldn't help but feel proud. I didn't know, not then, that this was only the beginning of something that would shake me and her, in ways we couldn't have imagined. Thought everything seemed normal at first. The children played in the living room, laughing and giggling. The radio hummed softly in the background, and I thought this day would be simple. I was wrong. There was a strange tension in the air, subtle, almost invisible, but it made me uneasy. Something was gathering, an invisible storm I couldn't yet name. Lily had put her heart into every detail, every dish, every little decoration. She had stayed up late nights, skipped plans with friends, sacrificed her own rest all to make this family gathering perfect. And yet, as the first guests started arriving, I felt a weight pressing down, heavier than I expected. At first, it was just glances, polite smiles, some faked more than others, compliments that felt forced, like they were weighing every bite, judging every dish before even tasting it. Lily didn't notice, or maybe she refused to. Her pride and hope shone too brightly for her to see what was slowly happening around her. But I saw it, the way my cousin frowned when she picked up the first plate, the way whispered comments floated through the room like small, invisible knives. I could feel the temperature shift, the warmth of our home fading into something colder, sharper. Then came the first real blow. "It's interesting," my cousin said, and I swear I could hear every letter slicing into the quiet of the kitchen. Her tone was light, casual almost, but the words carried more than just critique. They carried dismissal. My daughter froze, her hands stiffened, her bright energy dimming like a light being switched off. She had worked so hard, put so much of herself into this, and in one moment, that effort seemed invisible. My chest tightened as I realized that this wasn't just a small family gathering gone wrong. It was a collision of pride, love, and expectation with the harshness of judgment. Minutes crawled forward, but each one felt like an hour. Small mistakes, which normally would have been overlooked, were magnified under the eyes of people who didn't seem to care. Plates were picked at, jokes were made, laughter sometimes hidden in mockery. I could see Lily shrinking, her confidence waver, the color draining from her cheeks. I wanted to step in, to defend her, to say something that would make it better, but what could I do? These weren't strangers, these were family, and I realized, painfully, that sometimes even family can be cruel. Just when I thought it might settle, someone spoke again, louder this time. A relative I hadn't expected to comment, a person who had been quiet until now, said, "Did she really have to do all this? It's unnecessary." The words hung in the room like a storm cloud, thick and heavy, waiting to burst. I saw Lily's eyes widen, her chest tightening as if she couldn't breathe. The humiliation, the dismissal, the judgment, it all fell on her small shoulders. The room had shifted from celebration to battlefield. Every effort, every sacrifice she had made over those 3 long days, seemed like nothing to them. I remember the moment the laugh came, sharp, mocking, cutting through the room like a blade, the kind of laugh that says, without words, that what someone has done doesn't matter, that love and effort can be erased in a single second. Lily's shoulders trembled, her hands gripped the edge of the counter, and I felt my own stomach knot with helplessness. I wanted to scream, to defend her, to tell them all that what she had done was beautiful, was meaningful, was worthy, but the words got stuck in my throat. And then, in that heavy silence, I realized something. This wasn't just about cooking. This wasn't about plates, or recipes, or even family pride. This was about respect, about acknowledgement, about the quiet injustices that can exist in the people closest to you. Effort can be dismissed, love can be ignored, and sometimes, even your own heart, your own hope, has to carry the weight of other people's indifference. I looked at Lily, her eyes shimmering with tears, trying to smile through the hurt, and I felt both pride and pain at the same time. She had given everything, yet the world, or at least our little corner of it, was unkind. I could see the storm gathering in her chest, the mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief that I had felt so many times in my own life. It was all happening so fast, and yet it felt eternal. And just as I thought we might survive this quietly, another voice chimed in, sharper this time, questioning her work even more directly. My stomach sank. The room had become a courtroom. Lily was on trial, and every comment, every glance, every smirk was a judgment. I could feel her confidence crack, her heart faltering, but there was also something else. I could see it flickering. Beneath the surface, determination, resilience, even under the weight of mockery, she hadn't fallen completely. That was the moment I knew. The rest of this day would test everything, our patience, our dignity, our love. The warmth of our home had been replaced by tension, fear, and disbelief, and none of us knew how it would end. But I also knew one thing for certain. Lily wasn't going to let them define her. She wasn't going to let this break her, even if it hurt more than anything I had ever seen. The guests had barely settled when I noticed the first real shift in the room. Conversations that had once been polite now carried an edge, almost invisible to some, but impossible to ignore. Lily moved from plate to plate, offering food with that hopeful, radiant smile she always wore when she was proud of something she had made. I wanted to stop her, to warn her, to somehow shield her from what I knew was coming, but I couldn't. All I could do was watch. Helpless. At first, it was subtle, a raised eyebrow here, a murmured comment there, interesting choice of ingredients, someone whispered behind a polite laugh. I could see Lily's hands freeze for a moment. Then, she shook her head, forcing herself to smile. She had poured everything into this meal. 3 days, no sleep, no time for herself, all for this moment. And already it felt like it was slipping from her hands. That as more people arrived, the tension thickened. The room, which had once felt warm and inviting, now seemed smaller, suffocating almost, as if each judgmental glance and whispered comment added weight. Lily tried to stay focused, moving from guest to guest, but the energy in the room was contagious. I could feel it pressing down on her, squeezing her confidence like a vice. Every bite, every compliment, every polite smile seemed forced, as if our family's approval was a currency she hadn't earned. And then it happened. A cousin, one who had always been somewhat critical, picked up a plate of her famous lasagna and took a deliberate bite, chewing slowly. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Finally, the words came, dripping with mockery disguised as concern. "Well, it's different, isn't it?" Lily's eyes widened. Her hands dropped to her sides, and the dish she had carried with pride seemed suddenly heavy. I could feel the lump in my throat, the familiar sting of helplessness, rising. This was no longer about food. It was about recognition, respect, and the cruel sting of judgment. I tried to intervene, to offer some reassurance, but before I could speak, another voice joined in. Did she really have to go through all this trouble? It seems unnecessary. The words hit like a hammer. I watched Lily's shoulders slump ever so slightly, and my heart ached as I realized that this wasn't just a passing moment of critique, it was an onslaught of dismissal, layered with the kind of subtle cruelty that's hardest to defend against. The laughter that followed was sharp, piercing, the kind that leaves no room for dignity. Lily's lips trembled, but she didn't cry yet. I could see the battle raging in her mind, hurt, humiliation, disbelief, and yet somewhere beneath it all, a spark of defiance. She had worked so hard, given everything she had, and though the world, or at least this small corner of it, was trying to diminish her, she wasn't ready to let it win. Minutes dragged on, each one heavier than the last. People began picking at the food, making subtle jokes, pretending to be polite while clearly mocking her effort. I could feel the injustice in the room like a thick fog, seeping into every corner, making it harder to breathe. And yet, through it all, Lily kept moving, kept offering plates, kept trying to make the day what she had envisioned. She was small, fragile looking in the moment, but there was a strength I could see flickering behind her eyes. Then came the tipping point. One of the older relatives, usually quiet, spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "All this fuss over cooking, really, it's too much." The words were cruel in their casual delivery, the kind of comment that makes you feel as if everything you've done is meaningless. I saw Lily stiffen, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. The room fell almost silent after that, like everyone was holding their breath. waiting to see how she would react. And in that silence, I could see at the moment where everything might break. Lily's face flushed, her eyes shimmered with tears, and I realized just how unfair the world could be, even in the smallest, most personal ways. We often think injustice happens in big, obvious moments, but sometimes it's in quiet dismissals, in subtle mockery, in the way people can devalue your hard work without saying a single harsh word directly. Yet even in that moment, Lily didn't fall. Not completely. She drew in a shaky breath, squared her shoulders, and moved to serve another dish, forcing a polite smile. And I understood something important. This was more than a meal, more than a family gathering. It was a test of resilience, of dignity, of hope in the face of unfairness. I wanted to scream at them all, to make them see what they were doing. But instead, I stayed quiet, letting the moment wash over us. Because sometimes the hardest lessons, the ones that leave the deepest marks, aren't shouted, they're lived. And just when I thought we might endure the rest of the afternoon quietly, a sharp, mocking laugh cut through the room. I felt my stomach drop. The laughter wasn't about food, it was about control, judgment, and making someone else feel small. Lily flinched, but the spark in her eyes didn't go out. She was hurt, yes, but she wasn't broken yet. In that moment, I realized that what we had faced so far was only the beginning. The day was far from over, and the real test of her courage, my own patience, and our strength as a family was just about to begin. And I knew, deep down, that the worst of the judgment and the dismissal was yet to come. It all happened so fast, yet it felt like time had slowed to a crawl. I watched Lily standing by the counter, hands trembling, her eyes wide with disbelief, as the comments, the judgment, the laughter from earlier continued to swirl around her like a storm. Every glance, every whispered remark, every mocking tone was a weight pressing down on her chest, threatening to crush the pride she had built over 3 long, exhausting days. I could feel it myself, the helplessness, the anger, the despair, but I knew this wasn't my fight alone. This was her moment to face, to endure, to survive. Then the words hit her like a punch to the stomach. One of the relatives, someone who had been quiet until now, looked her straight in the eye and said, "All this work, for what? Does anyone even care?" There was no warmth, no humor, no kindness, just pure dismissal. I could see Lily's shoulders slump, her bright energy dimming in an instant. Her hands, which had carried plate after plate with hope and love, shook as if they might let go of everything she had worked for. I wanted to step in, to hug her, to tell her it was okay, that her effort mattered, that her love mattered, but I couldn't, not yet. She had to face this, had to feel it, had to decide if she would let it break her. And then the laughter came, sharp, cutting, echoing in the room like nails on a chalkboard. It was mocking, cruel, dismissive, everything that no one should ever feel after giving their heart completely to something. I could see Lily's eyes flicker with a mixture of shock, hurt, and anger. My chest tightened. It was one of those moments that leave you breathless. The kind of moment where you realize that even in your closest circles, injustice can appear quietly, subtly, and still leave deep wounds. Minutes stretched endlessly, each one heavier than the last. The comments kept coming, small and big, all carrying the same cruel undercurrent. People picked at the food, made jokes under their breath, exchanged glances that made it clear. Lily's effort didn't matter, and yet, in the midst of it all, she didn't crumble completely. She drew a shaky breath, squared her shoulders, and continued to serve, forcing a polite smile, even as tears threatened to spill over. Her courage flickered in the dim light of the room like a fragile flame, but it was enough to keep the storm at bay for now. And then came the tipping point. Another relative, someone older and usually quiet, spoke, their voice cutting through the room like glass. Honestly, did she really have to do all this? It's too much. We could have managed without it. The words weren't just criticism, they were dismissal, judgment, a subtle but sharp reminder that even love and effort can be devalued. Lily froze, her chest tight, and I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes. I wanted to scream at them, to make them understand, to protect her from this unfairness, but all I could do was stand there, feeling the helpless rage bubble inside me. And yet, something remarkable happened. Even with tears glistening in her eyes, Lily lifted her chin, her lips trembled, but her eyes held a spark that refused to go out. She moved to the next dish, carried it carefully, and continued offering her food with quiet dignity. I could see it in her hurt, yes, but also resilience, courage, and determination. She wasn't broken. She was learning that sometimes the world will try to crush you, to dismiss you, to make you feel small, but you have to keep going anyway. The room was heavy with tension. Every movement felt like it might shatter the fragile calm. Every glance felt like judgment. And yet, in that pressure, Lily began to shine in a way I hadn't expected. She had faced the worst of it, the mockery, the dismissal, the quiet cruelty of people she loved, and she had survived. Not unscathed, not untouched, but alive and determined. And I realized that sometimes, the moments that hurt the most are the ones that teach us the most about who we are, about what we can endure, and about the quiet strength we carry inside us. But even as I watched her, I couldn't shake the sense that this day wasn't just about family or food. It was about something bigger, about the way people dismiss others quietly, subtly, almost without thinking, the way effort and care are sometimes ignored, the way the small injustices of life leave marks that last far longer than any visible wound. I felt it in my chest, the weight of that realization pressing down, and I knew that what Lily and I had experienced was a reflection of a larger truth about human nature, about bias, about judgment, and about the courage it takes to hold on to dignity when the world seems determined to strip it away. And then, just when I thought we had reached the breaking point, a silence fell over the room. It was heavy, tense, expectant. Everyone was waiting for what, I didn't know, but I could feel it. This was the moment that would define the rest of the day, the moment that would show whether Lily would crumble or rise, whether the storm of judgment would win, or whether her quiet strength would carry her through. I could see her take a deep, shaky breath, her chin still lifted, and I realized that she was ready to face whatever came next, ready to prove, not to anyone else, but to herself, that love, effort, and courage could never be taken away. And in that still, heavy moment, I understood something I will never forget. Sometimes, the world will try to make you feel small. Sometimes, people you love will dismiss your effort, your care, your heart. But there is a power in endurance, a strength in dignity, and a kind of victory in simply refusing to let the world define you. And as I watched Lily, standing there trembling but unbroken, I knew we were on the edge of something that would change us forever. Something that would leave scars, yes, but also a quiet, unshakable strength that no one could ever take away. The silence lingered in the room, after the storm of judgment, like the calm that comes after a hurricane. I could feel my heart still pounding in my chest, my hands trembling as I watched Lily slowly gather herself. She looked around at the faces of the people who had criticized, judged, and dismissed her. And I could see in her eyes the mix of hurt and quiet defiance that I had watched flicker throughout the day. She had been humiliated, dismissed, and mocked, yet here she was, standing tall, fragile but unbroken. I stepped closer and put my hand gently on her shoulder. She flinched for a moment, not out of fear, but as if she was realizing that someone she trusted was still on her side. "It's okay, Lily," I whispered. "They can't take away what you've done, what you've put into this. It matters. To me, to the people who see it, and to you." She nodded, tears glimmering, but there was a small, almost imperceptible smile on her lips, a tiny spark of hope amidst the wreckage of hurt. The guests began to shuffle awkwardly, some offering forced apologies, others pretending nothing had happened. But the atmosphere had changed. No one could ignore the quiet strength that Lily now carried. I realized in that moment that it wasn't about the plates of food, or the effort, or even the love she had poured into this gathering. It was about resilience. It was about dignity. It was about showing, without a single word, that no amount of judgment, mockery, or subtle cruelty could erase the value of someone's heart and effort. And yet, even as I watched her regain a little of her light, I couldn't help but think about the deeper truths this day had revealed. How often are people dismissed quietly, subtly, almost without thinking? How many times does effort go unnoticed, kindness ignored, courage overlooked? The injustice we had faced in our home that afternoon was small, in the grand scheme of the world, yet it reflected something far bigger, a pattern I had seen time and time again, in ways both obvious and invisible. It was a reminder that life often tests us, not with loud, dramatic blows, but with quiet, persistent dismissals that weigh on the heart over time. Lily began to serve the remaining dishes, her movements slower now, but deliberate, as if reclaiming the pride that had been threatened. I watched her, silently marveling at her strength. She had faced dismissal, judgment, and humiliation, and yet she had endured. She had survived, and in that survival, there was a lesson not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed it. Life isn't always fair. People aren't always kind. And yet, the courage to continue, to give, to care, and to hold on to dignity, that is where true strength lies. By the end of the afternoon, the house had quieted. Some guests had left, others lingered awkwardly, but the energy had shifted. Lily was exhausted, drained from the emotional storm she had endured, but she was proud. I hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of the day settle between us. I whispered again, "You did it, you made it through, and nothing they said can ever change what you've given." She leaned into me, tears finally falling freely, but there was no shame in them, only the release of everything she had carried. I realized then that this story, our story, was bigger than a family gathering gone wrong. It was about life, about human nature, about the quiet injustices that exist around us, often invisible, often unacknowledged. It was about the courage it takes to keep going when the world seems determined to belittle your efforts, to undermine your love, to dismiss your heart. And most of all, it was about the power of resilience, the way a small, determined flame can survive even in the coldest storm. As I look back on that day, I think about the lessons it left us with. Not all battles are loud, and not all victories are celebrated. Some victories are quiet, almost invisible, but their impact is lasting. The question I keep asking myself, and one I hope everyone listening will ask too, is this: how many small injustices do we overlook every day? How many acts of love, effort, and courage go unrecognized, quietly dismissed by those around us? And what can we do to change that? Because sometimes, the most meaningful victories aren't celebrated with applause, they're lived in silence, carried quietly in the heart, and remembered long after the world has turned its attention elsewhere. Lily's courage, her endurance, and her dignity that day taught me more than any words ever could. And I hope that by sharing this story, it will remind someone out there that even when the world seems unkind, even when effort is dismissed and love is overlooked, it's never wasted. So I ask you, how often do we stop and acknowledge the quiet courage around us? How often do we lift someone up instead of letting them carry the weight of indifference alone? And maybe, just maybe, if we all took a moment to notice, to care, to affirm, the world would feel a little less heavy, a little more just, and a little more filled with hope. The house was quiet now. The storm of words, judgment, and mockery had passed, leaving only the echoes of what had happened. I could feel the tension slowly lifting, but the weight of the day still lingered in the air, like a shadow that refused to leave completely. Lily sat at the table, exhausted, her small frame slumped but steady. I walked over and held her hand, feeling the tremor in her fingers, a reminder of just how much she had endured. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, that the world would recognize her effort, that people would see how much she had given, but I knew better. Life doesn't always reward love, effort, or sacrifice the way we hope. Sometimes, it tests us, pushes us to our limits, and forces us to find strength we didn't know we had. And yet, even in the face of injustice, Lily had survived. She had endured the subtle cruelty, the dismissive words, the mockery, and she had not allowed it to break her completely. That, I realized, was victory. We cleaned up together, slowly, wordlessly. Every plate she had made, every dish she had prepared, was put away. But the effort behind it lingered, not in the kitchen, not in the empty plates, but in her, in me, and in the quiet truth that we had been through something bigger than a family gathering. We had faced subtle injustice, humiliation, and dismissal, and yet here we were, standing, breathing, alive, and unbroken. I looked around at the empty chairs and the remnants of the day, and it struck me how often life works this way. People judge, dismiss, and belittle quietly, subtly, almost invisibly. Effort and care can be overlooked in a heartbeat. Love can be ignored. And yet, the courage to continue, to give fully, to hold on to dignity, even when no one notices or applauds, that is where real strength lives. Lily looked at me, exhaustion written across her face, and said softly, "I guess I did it anyway." And in that simple sentence, I felt everything: pride, love, relief, and a deep understanding of what had just happened. She had done it anyway. Despite fear, despite judgment, despite the weight of disapproval pressing down on her, she had done it anyway. And that was the lesson, the one that would stay with both of us forever. I realized then that this day, as painful and humiliating as it had been, was a reflection of the world outside our home. Life is filled with quiet injustices, people overlooked, effort dismissed, kindness ignored, and the question that lingers for all of us is this: how often do we notice? How often do we lift someone up instead of letting them carry the weight of indifference alone? How many small acts of courage go unrecognized, waiting for someone to see, to affirm, to honor them? We can't change the past, but we can carry the lessons forward. Lily's bravery, her endurance, and her refusal to be broken taught me more than words ever could. And I hope that by sharing this story, someone out there will recognize the quiet courage in their own life, or in the lives of those around them, and choose to honor it, to protect it, to celebrate it, even when no one else does. Sometimes, the greatest victories aren't shouted from rooftops. They aren't marked by applause or accolades. They are lived quietly, in resilience, in dignity, in the choice to keep going when the world seems determined to dismiss you. Lily's story, our story, is proof of that. And I know now, as I hold her hand and watch her finally relax, that the impact of courage, love, and effort lasts far longer than any moment of judgment ever could. So, I leave you with this. Notice the quiet strength around you. Recognize the love that goes unseen. Honor the effort that seems invisible. And never forget the smallest acts of courage, the tiniest sparks of hope, have the power to change hearts, lives, and maybe even the world. Because in the end, it isn't the applause that matters, it's the love, the strength, and the resilience that survive, quietly, unshakable, and everlasting.